everybody for coming. We appreciate you being here. We bring these speaker series to you as a value proposition for your museum membership. We hope you enjoy them and the variety of subject matter that we present. Please invite your friends and neighbors to become museum members. Members have free access to the museum year-round and are given free access to all of the speaker series throughout the year. Normally, that's 20 to 24 presentations annually. We are a 501c3, not-for-profit organization, so the only way we stay in business is through your generosity, and we do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Next, if you have a item that you would like to hear a speaker series presented on, please tell us, because almost every speaker series that we do has been presented to us by somebody in this audience. And they give us a suggestion, we research it, and if we can get it together, we'll sure do it. Let me tell you about upcoming events at the museum, if I could. On November 7th and November 21st, we have our homeschool lessons. The homeschool lessons, all children that are being homeschooled are given free access to the museum. We do not charge for them. We do have programs for them, and right now we're doing passport portfolio, and it's of Denmark. On November 19th, we'll have another speaker series. It's Shane Wagner, and he's going to talk about the history of postal charters, Pierre Menard Home, Fort Kaskaskia. And that's going to be presented by Kurt's Farms. On 12/3, Tom Greminger is going to do a presentation on one-room schools here in St. Genevieve County. And at date, he told me he's got 60 plus one-room schools. And he's got a GPS where you can locate them, and he will have pictures of a lot of them. So we're looking forward to that. We do not have a sponsor for that. Anybody would like to help us sponsor that program, we'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. Also, Mindy, who's collecting at the front door, said if I don't announce the fact that she's got great St. Nick's and Christmas gifts in the gift shop, that she's getting me. So I'm going to tell you that in the gift shop, we offer puzzles. And if you bring us a photo, any photo of your children, photo of your dog, photo of your car, photo of your tractor, photo of your favorite paleontologist, whatever that may be, we can have a puzzle made within a half hour for you and ready to go. So custom-made photos, make great Christmas gift, make great stocking stuffers for kids. We also have and I don't know if I'll pronounce this right, Feihiho bracelets and plushes. And what these are is little bracelets that they get, and they adopt an animal. And that could be hold on, we got one right here. Anjanette's got one. What do you got, Anjanette?
A polar bear.
She's got a polar bear. So she can tell you everywhere that polar bear went this week.
I'm not sure. I tried to get to October.
Well, thanks for that big uplift. I thought I planted you out there for a reason.
I did buy this bracelet today, though.
Okay, so these bracelets, you can buy any animal, adopt an animal that you want, polar bear, lion, penguins, ostrich, whatever they've got in there, and it'll track that animal. And wherever it's at, it'll tell you. Snow leopard, my grandson's got a snow leopard, and the amount of distance that it travels in a day, and it maps it out on a map, and you can track it. So makes a great Christmas gift. They're about 15 bucks, so they're a great little stocking stuffer, and most of the kids that get one want more. So my grandson now has 4, and I can tell you. Okay, I'll remember that. I got to cut him off. He's getting into my retirement fund now. So we have a lot of unique items at the museum in the gift shop. Please stop by and visit us on that. For this event, we want to do a huge thank you to our sponsor, who is Lakeland Insurance this evening. They sponsored this program. They cover the cost of the program, which allows our 501c3 to put these events on and not take anything out of our budget to do it. So thank you to Lakeland Insurance. And you can never put one of these events on without thanking Dick Breminger, who is gracious enough to give us this fine facility, food, drinks, have it access and open to us. Thank you, Dick. Now, it's my privilege to introduce to you the speakers this evening. Steve Wiegenstein. Got it, first staff. Steve is the author of 5 books. Most recently, Land of Joy, the historic novel that takes place at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair and in the fictional Ozark village of Daybreak. His short story collection, Scattered Lights, was a finalist for the 2021 Penn Faulkner Award in Fiction. He has written 3 earlier historical novels, also set in that fictional town of Daybreak, The Language of Trees, This Old World, and Slant of Light. Steve grew up in the Missouri Ozarks and worked there as a newspaper reporter before entering the field of higher education. He taught journalism, English, and communication for a number of colleges and universities during his career, and he's now retired from teaching and writes full-time. For your pleasure, Steve. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me get down front here where I can see everybody. And I will do my best not to fall backwards off the steps. So, yeah, that's my number one goal of this evening, is not to embarrass myself by falling backwards off the steps. In the course of writing my next historical novel, which is set in the mid-1920s, I kind of felt like I was sort of obligated to include the famous great tornado, the so-called tri-state tornado of 1925. Because if you grew up in this area, you probably heard about it from the old timers. I grew up in Annapolis, to the west of here, southwest of here. And when my family moved to Annapolis, I was a kid of 10 years old. And the town was full of, at that time, of old timers who reminisced about experiencing the tornado. And as most kids do, I discounted what they had to say. I figured they were exaggerating and that sort of thing. So when I came back to the story of the tornado now in the last couple of years, I realized they were not exaggerating. They were probably, if anything, playing it down a little bit because it was just too horrible for them to remember. So with the assistance of the Missouri Humanities Council, which I definitely want to give a shout out to because they make my work going around and giving these talks possible. I put together a little summary and some reflections on the tornado of 1925 because this is its centennial year, and it's what better time to look back. So what I'm going to do is look at the storm, give you a little quick history of the storm itself, talk briefly about the aftermath, what happened after the storm, and then some lessons that perhaps we could learn today from our knowledge about that storm. So that's my plan for the evening. So let's move on first to the storm itself. That, by the way, is a pretty famous painting by John Stuart Curry from 1929. And even though that's not how the Great Tornado looked. He mentioned at some point that he was kind of inspired to make the painting by that. Let me move on to the scene on that day, all right? Now, those of us from this part of the country will probably recognize this weather pattern. It's a very familiar weather pattern in the springtime in particular, right? We've got a big ridge of cold, high-pressure air coming down from Canada. In this case, the high-pressure system made it as far as the Texas Panhandle, where it collides with a big warm air mass that's come up from the Gulf of Mexico. And so the two of them, when they hit, they create a squall line and set rise to a bunch of storms that sort of flow along that squall line from southwest to northeast. If you've lived in this territory for any length of time, you've seen this on Channel 12 or the St. Louis stations. The storm began in Reynolds County, Missouri on March the 18th, 1925. That's a Wednesday afternoon, about 1 in the afternoon. Okay, so here's a contemporary map of what Missouri looked like in this region at that time. You can see Reynolds County over there in the center left. Ellington, the largest town in the county, is down off that little road. St. Gen, of course, you can see the bottom third of St. Genevieve County poking down from the top of the map. The first sighting of this storm, and I'll just kind of step down here and point it to you. Would be right up. I can't reach that high. Okay. It was north of Ellington, about 3 miles or so north of Ellington. Now, there had been a severe storm with a presumed tornado that had gone through Shannon County a little earlier in the morning. And some people think, well, that was the same tornado. But it's hard enough to tell that most people say that the official beginning of this tornado was there at, thank you for that, there at
I got this for you to use.
oh, okay, well, thank you.
Just press that button there.
All right,
Use the laser
the center button, or
No,
the front
the
top
top
button? Okay, there we go. Let's see if I can make it. Okay, there it is. Yeah, right there's Ellington. And there's, right, and there's Redford. And here's the Black River where I grew up. So what we're looking at, and let me just move on to the next slide. I'll reach down here and grab that if I need it again. This is the path of the tornado. Okay. Starting over there, you notice that the tornado goes right over the top of Annapolis. Okay. From there, it goes through the woods in eastern Iron County and sort of south central Madison County before it strikes again at a little crossroads called Central, which by the name you can kind of figure is dead center in Madison County. Crosses over in the northern part of Bullinger County, north of Patton, north of Sedgwickville, and then enters Perry County, where it travels basically the entire width of Perry County for the most part. I was chatting with some folks earlier who grew up in Perry County, and they remarked that there are still some places where you can see tin that's been embedded into tree trunks and things like that from the tornado of 100 years ago. Now, the first thing I would remark about this is that this is an extremely long path for a tornado. Okay, already we're looking at about an 85-mile path right here. Most tornadoes, on average, will only go about 6 miles before they lift up. Okay? So what we've got here already is kind of a freak tornado. Okay? Also, it was unbelievably fast moving. This particular storm, because the storm cell was so intense, its ground speed was something that people just had never seen before. Its first sighting was north of Ellington, just right after 1 in the afternoon. It hit Annapolis at 1:15. That's 15 minutes later. And to make that distance, it had to have been traveling about more than 70 miles an hour along the ground. So when we look back and say, what made this storm so destructive? One of the elements was its incredibly fast speed as it moved along, wreaking devastation. It was also very, very strong. So let me move on to the next slide and show you, this is what Annapolis looked like at the time. This is a map of Annapolis, U.S. Geological Survey map from the 1920s. It's a little railroad town. If you've never been there, it kind of looks like this. Still, in fact. The layout of the town hasn't changed much. There's a railroad you can kind of see coming down Big Creek and then going out to the south. That's the Missouri Pacific line headed from St. Louis to Texarkana and points beyond. Which is the reason the town exists in the first place, was as a rail hub. 2 parallel streets, one that fronts the railroad and then one that's set back from it. Maybe I will borrow this again. Okay. A couple of things to notice. Let's see, that right there with a little flag on it, that's the school. Okay, it was a 2-story, 4-room road up this little valley. And you can see a little cluster of buildings right there, and then a cluster of bigger buildings back there. That was the Annapolis Lead Company. It was a lead mine back there. And this little cluster of buildings here was the shanty town where the workers lived. And it was called Leadana. Not very imaginative name, but I guess you work with whatever you've got. So that's what Annapolis looked like. And the storm would be coming in from the southwest, right? Basically this direction, coming right over here, and it went right over the town, okay, at 72 miles an hour. And this is what Annapolis looked like after the storm had hit. Basically, every building in the town was either destroyed or damaged, with the exception of a few buildings just at the north edge of town. The tornado here was about a half a mile wide. Luckily, one of those buildings that escaped the damage was that schoolhouse, which was full of kids. And so, all things considered, Annapolis got off easy. This is the general store, or one of the 2 general stores in Annapolis at the time. You can kind of see there's a cook stove that's been flung from who knows where. Looking at old historic photographs is how meteorologists determine what the strength of a historic tornado was. And they can pick up clues by looking at the type of destruction, the level of destruction, and things like that. And they all agree that this was an F5 tornado, that this was the strongest possible tornado, partly because buildings, and you can see a brick building here that was damaged, beyond repair, obviously. This was the mayor's house. Most of the wood buildings were just rendered into matchsticks. Right? There's not only, they weren't just blown over, they were turned into basically nothing. And here's the lead mine, okay? Also essentially destroyed. Okay, the walls have been blown out, the machinery is all ruined. somehow the smokestack remained standing, but can't quite figure out how that happened. A couple of lucky accidents, I suppose. One is that the station master at the depot managed to get a message out, to telegraph a message out that Annapolis was being struck by a tornado. Okay. Because he was able to get that message out before the lines went down, this alerted people in the outside world that the tornado had hit and set things into motion for relief. There were 2 trains on the tracks in Annapolis, both of them passenger trains, one, a northbound and a southbound. Miraculously, they had enough time to pull out, and they were not standing at the depot when the tornado came through. So they were able to escape the worst of the damage. And because it was at 1 in the afternoon, or 1:15 when it hit, there was a full shift of miners underground. Now, they couldn't come back out very easily because everything had been destroyed up top. They had to use the emergency escape ladders. But what safer place can there be during a tornado than 600 feet underground? And so the loss of life in Annapolis was surprisingly small to see a town that's just basically been completely leveled. Now this, we're moving into kind of the territory that you all would be more familiar with. This is just north of Uniontown. And this is the home of a family named Bleckley, which was, as you can see, again, not just blown over, but destroyed completely. And let me move on to the next slide real quick. This is farther along in Perry County. This is all in southern Perry County, at a little community that was known as Ridge. Ridge, as you can guess by its name, was situated on a ridge. And basically the last ridge before the Mississippi River. Okay. And there was a parochial school up in that upper left corner where the X is marked, that was blown down that away. So it was essentially completely demolished again. And one of the things that people pick up on in these photographs is a phenomenon that's known as ground scouring. And that's another way to measure the strength of a storm, in that the ground itself looks like somebody has gone over it with a street sweeper or something, just completely scoured the earth. And one last Perry County picture here, real quick. This is also at Ridge, or near Ridge. A home that was severely damaged, the barn blown down, and they turned it into an emergency tornado hospital. Okay, so estimates of death in Missouri range from a low of 12 to higher range of up into the teens. But this tornado was just getting started, and that's the thing that made it the deadliest tornado in American history. You can kind of see here, this is a track of the damage. There's a group of tornado fans, I guess you could call them, who go to great lengths to just kind of comb through the historical record and figure out exactly what got damaged, how badly, and where. So I borrowed their labors to kind of show you the track of the tornado through Perry County, because right over the top of Bealey, where a couple of people are killed, and then, as you can see, sort of north of Uniontown, north of Frona, right over Brazeau, that little cluster of red dots on the far right, that's Ridge, where the tornado crosses over into Illinois. It goes across the Mississippi River. So here's its path through Illinois. Okay. And once again, it sort of boggles the mind. This tornado is not lifting into the sky the way that tornadoes do. It's staying on the ground all this way, completely across southern Illinois. And it's staying on the same path, right? And damage reports are consistent right along that line, so you can tell it's the same storm. You know, this is not like multiple tornadoes coming out of one system. It's the same doggone storm that just keeps churning its way all the way across Illinois. And the town that got hit the worst was Murfreesboro, right across the river from you all. Or not directly across, but close enough to recognize. Murfreesboro at that time was a town of about 12,000. Okay. And it, just like Annapolis, it took a direct hit. Right? The F5 tornado went right through town. Okay. And we have some remarkable panoramic photos that were taken within the next day or two of the damage and the destruction in Murfreesboro that give you a sort of sense of just how total this was. There's this one. Let's see, let me move on. Yeah, here's another one of a neighborhood. This is, as you can, I don't know if you can see that from the printing, it says this is, particular photo was taken from the top of the high school building looking to the north. So it's looking north from the Murfreesboro High School. Basically every building in town took damage. Right? There were, the southeast part did not get destroyed, but within a couple days there was a photographer went over in a biplane to get some aerial photos, and this is what it looked like. Basically looks like a bomb has gone off in Murfreesboro. One of the, this is Longfellow School, one of the schools in Murfreesboro. Unfortunately, there were several schools in Murfreesboro that were destroyed or very badly damaged. 17 children lost their lives here. And then in the next picture, you can see there's the Longfellow School from a distance now. And you can see the level of destruction that's all around it. This is basically just an unearthly experience. It has slowed down a little bit, but it was still moving about 60 miles an hour as it crossed Illinois. So one effect of that is that people had no warning. Right? It was just impossible to, and when they saw it, it was already on them, and a tornado that's moving at 60 miles an hour, you really don't have much time to react, just a few seconds, basically. Finally lifts into the air in Indiana, to the northeast of Princeton. If you've ever gone from St. Louis on I-64 across Illinois, that direction, when you cross the Wabash River there, that's basically right where the tornado would have crossed out of Illinois into Indiana. Princeton is about another dozen miles on into the Indiana state. Curiously enough, it took the worst economic damage because there was a big railroad remanufacturing and repair shop there. There was also a ketchup factory, and both of those got destroyed. So Indiana lost a lot of money. Ultimately, there were about 700 people killed in this tornado. And it remains to this day the largest single loss of life from a tornado in American history. There were 48 schools along the way that were damaged or destroyed. And the equivalent of $2.9 billion in today's money of damage. And those are, estimates. It's hard to really get a good grip on this storm. The 219-mile path is the longest track that any tornado has ever left in the United States. Here real quick. So I mentioned that the station master in Annapolis was able to telegraph a message out. One of the things that did was alert the public at large, okay, that an incredibly destructive tornado was passing through the Midwest. The Red Cross in St. Louis, as Red Cross chapters typically do if they're in any sizable location, had emergency supplies loaded up on rail cars, ready to go to wherever an emergency would strike. So when they got the message that the tornado had hit Annapolis, they were able to launch that train within just a few hours. Right? And the relief train reached Annapolis later that night. Okay? Now, riding along on the relief train were some reporters. Right? They jumped on the train too because it was their job to see what the heck was going on. So the news of this tornado got out very fast. We think of ourselves today living in the sort of a lightning speed era of communication. It's really remarkable to me how quickly this news disseminated across the country. You know, with that night, there were news reports coming in about the scale of destruction. It very quickly became apparent that Murfreesboro, where over 200 people lost their lives, was the worst hit, and so aid was redirected to Murfreesboro. Okay, so if you were in a little small farming town along the path somewhere, you were, going to have to look for help a little bit more on your own. There are, as you can see from these very first reports, this is the St. Louis Globe-Democrat. They got some things wrong, as first news accounts tend to do. Right? They got some things wrong. They mentioned of 88 children at the school in DeSoto, Illinois, not DeSoto, Missouri, but DeSoto, Illinois. That's about 55 more children than were actually killed, but still it's a terrible amount. The death toll was overstated. But I think what's important to be aware of is that in the aftermath of the tornado, and let me just move on to the next slide, relief was set into motion almost instantly. Okay, this is a news report from the Iron County Register. Okay. That night, folks in the Arcadia Valley got together. They pledged, raised $1,300. They loaded up trucks. They were getting things ready to be distributed. By that time, of course, the Red Cross relief train was already on its way. So the Red Cross took charge. People were very quick to respond to this storm. This is the beginning of a very long list of people who had donated to the Cyclone Fund, as they called it. I just include that because it's kind of amusing that one of the biggest donors was the Ku Klux Klan chapter in Ironton. They kicked in $50. The Fredericktown Klan also brought in $25. So what can I say? They did their part, I suppose. The Red Cross was in charge of immediate relief. Right? In each of these little towns along the way, the Red Cross would go and they would set up relief tents like this. Okay. These were, as you can see, they're pretty primitive, but it's a roof over your head. Right? And this was in mid-March, so it was definitely you needed some shelter from the cold at this time. Within a week, the Red Cross had collected $1 million to go toward relief and recovery efforts. So that's one of the things that was going on in the immediate aftermath of the tornado, was this rush of relief. Now, another thing that happened very quickly was tornado tourism. Right? Everybody wanted to go see. It's a sad fact of human nature, I think, that as soon as that you hear that there's a disaster, you want to go see. The ferry at Wittenberg was busy all day, carrying people back and forth who were just basically there to look. The filling stations all ran out of gasoline because there were so many people, so many tourists had come to look. Estimated 10,000 visitors in Annapolis. I mean, this is a town of 300, so you can kind of figure what a traffic jam that must have been like. People were selling postcards the next week, and that's, I guess lucky for us, that's where a lot of our historical record comes from, is these entrepreneur, enterprising people who said, wow, I'm going to go take some pictures. I could make some money doing this. Also, let me look at the next slide. The only insurance folks in town were like, hey, this looks like an opportunity. So this was from the Perry County Republican. The very next week, is like, wouldn't you like to buy some tornado insurance? Of course, it wouldn't do them much good because their house had already been blown over. But I guess it's another fact of life, I suppose, is that there are ways to capitalize on disasters, and people took advantage of those. So when I think about this tornado and I sort of contemplate it, I think, what are the things that we can learn from it? Let me just move on to those. People will rush to help in times of disaster. That's the first thing that you immediately see here, is that somebody whose house did not get blown down would immediately start taking people in. Or somebody whose house was blown down, but they were, uninjured, would immediately start helping the injured. Right? There's, in any kind of natural disaster like this, there's just a rush to help. That help is often disorganized and temporary. We see that the Red Cross in 1925 stepped up very, very rapidly. And so, it's one of those situations where they have that kind of experience. They know what to do in the case of a disaster. Right? They've got railroad cars all packed up, sitting on a siding in St. Louis, waiting for a disaster to happen. Local folks, it's a little more catch as catch can, right? And everybody wants to help, but they don't always, know what to do. Your technology, whatever technology you have available, will put a limit on how much preparation and assistance you can provide. And I'll get to that a little more in just a minute. And then also, cultural attitudes make a difference. Let me compare for you, just by way of example, the difference that technology makes. Okay. In 1925, we had Murfreesboro hit by an F5 tornado. It's a town of 12,000 and there's 234 fatalities. That's roughly 2% of the entire population, okay, that dies in Murfreesboro within that day. Think about Joplin, 2011 in Joplin. Now it was at the time a town of about 50,000. Okay. There were 150, and it was also an F5 tornado, roughly the same level of strength of a tornado. Goes right through town, okay? Kills 158 people, which is a lot. Right? That's a significant loss of life in a tornado. But that's only roughly 0.3% of the population. And I think we all can immediately grasp what the big difference is in that kind of casualty rate. Can I get the next? Yeah. It's technology, right? Today we have a very advanced system of warning, of prediction and warning where tornadoes are concerned. We all get that message on our phone, or we hear the sirens go off. And not only that, but we've got more preparedness. Most of us have a pretty good idea what we're supposed to do in a tornado. Right? It's been drummed into us since we were kids in school. Right? In 1925, there wasn't any kind of organized or orchestrated effort toward tornado preparedness. It was most folk wisdom, as it was basically what you had. So today, if we were to get a similar kind of tornado coming through, we would have significantly fewer people killed, right? Simply because we're better prepared. We've got excellent prediction capability and pretty good warning capability. If you're out in some remote area, you might not hear a siren, but if you're in a populated area, you're probably going to hear a siren. The problem, for the most part, is do we pay attention? And do we heed the warning? And also, do our government and private officials make sure the system works the way it's supposed to? That terrible tornado that went through St. Louis earlier this year, the big problem was that the sirens had not been tested on a regular basis. And so when the time came to blow the sirens, they had a number of sirens that didn't work, and they did not have the right human infrastructure to make sure that the warnings went out in a timely way. There was delay in getting those warnings out that should not have occurred there. It was a human failure as much as it was a technological one. Can we back up just a second on that? Also today, there's a big difference in relief and recovery. In 1925, there was no government involvement in disaster recovery whatsoever. It was not considered to be any of the government's business. Okay. So if you were hit by any kind of natural disaster, you were going to have to rely not just in that moment on private relief, like the Red Cross, but in the recovery effort, which was going to take months to years, you were going to have to rely on private sources also. Okay. Today we have that mixture of private and government assistance that's available for both relief and recovery. The idea that you can call out the National Guard when the hurricane hits, that kind of thing exists today when it was really just not in people's minds in 1925. One of the curious things that I learned as I was researching this story was that prior to 1925, it was pretty commonly held opinion that a tornado was God's will. And if that's your opinion, that means there's not much you can really do about it, right? That's just the way it is. After 1925, and particularly because so many children were killed in this devastating tornado, there was a kind of visible shift in thinking. There was not that it was just God's will, shrug your shoulders, but rather we need to do more to reinforce our infrastructure and prepare for this. Okay, thank you. let me move on. Okay, so then what are the implications of that? Well, as you can kind of see, one of the main implications is, are people paying attention to the right sources? Okay. And do they know what to do when they're warned? One of the people, there are only 2 people that are clearly recorded as having been killed in Annapolis in the tornado. And one of those, when the tornado came, he did that thing that we're all told not to do, which is he went out on the porch to take a look. And up into the sky he went, and that was the end of him. So, just a word, don't do that. If you hear a tornado warning, go down into the basement. Don't go out on the porch. Okay, you can go out on the porch in another 5 minutes, and then you can look around, but don't go out right then. And also, currently we're living in an environment of cultural misinformation. I think that is really harming our response, particularly in the recovery phase to disasters. People will say anything online. Right? There's a tremendous amount of misinformation that flows around. This was a 1998 X-Files movie where Martin Landau, is saying that FEMA is a secret government. Well, that today is like common wisdom for a lot of people online. FEMA is doing all these terrible things. I don't even want to get into it. But we're living in an environment right now where even if people know what to do, they're inclined to mistrust what they're told. Right? And that's not good in terms of disaster recovery. So when you think about our next disaster, let me just say, all things considered, I hope it's a tornado, to be honest with you, because even though this tornado was the most violent and deadly tornado in our history, 700 people killed, roughly, is not so bad compared with what will be the death toll in a major earthquake or a major hurricane, if we're not prepared for it and we're not ready and listening to what happened. So all things considered, I'm more comfortable with, a tornado is violent and intense, but it's confined to, at its worst, this tornado was 1.5 miles wide. Okay. A hurricane, by contrast, will cover multiple states. So in terms of disasters, let's hope we do something better than crossing our fingers. And I don't need to tell you folks that it's probably a good idea to familiarize yourself with the correct things to do in case of an earthquake. We haven't had the big one on the New Madrid Fault since 1812, but that doesn't mean we won't, right? And so remind yourself, and I think, from what I was reading, the schools are getting back into what they call the Great Shakeout exercise, to where they're showing school kids what to do in the case of an earthquake, which is basically to drop to the floor, get underneath something, and then hang on to whatever it is that's sheltering you. Because in an earthquake, you only have seconds. With the tornado, we're kind of lazy now. It's like, 15 minutes warning, that's not enough. The folks in Murfreesboro would have loved to have had 15 minutes warning. We're kind of at the point where half an hour's warning is possible for us. We can do a lot in a half an hour's time or 15 minutes. But with an earthquake, you really literally only have 4 or 5 seconds before things start falling. So I think the thing that probably hinders most people is fear of embarrassment, because you don't want to be the one person who's ducked under a table when the earthquake comes and you look around and everybody else. But I'll tell you what, if it turns out to really be an earthquake, those folks are going to be wishing they were under a table. So keep that in mind. What I have here is a QR code which can send a survey back to the Missouri Humanities Council. So if you'd like to scan that, that's my email address, steve@stevewiegenstein.com. I'm always excited to get feedback and further conversations. Visit my website if you want to learn more about my books. I do have books up here for sale if anybody wants to buy any, or to talk to me about them. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much. And I do have time for questions or comments or further things.
I got a question. On that school where you showed the photo of the school by Perryville, how many children died in that?
Weirdly enough, nobody died at the Ridge School. It was pretty obvious there were a lot of severe injuries, but that particular school, nobody got killed.
Blew them down off the
Blew
hill.
them all the way down that hill and nobody died. Now, there were schools in both Perry and Bullinger counties that were destroyed with children killed. The school at Licksville, there were a couple of schools right there in northern Bullinger County was destroyed and some children were killed there. But like I said, all things considered, Missouri kind of got off easy in this storm. Yeah.
So we have a cabin in Arkansas, and it doesn't have a good place to hide for tornado. So they told us you won't get the tornadoes with the hills and the valleys. Is that right? Or
I wouldn't bet on it because this tornado went through like from Annapolis to Madison County. That's really hilly country through there, and so it would have skipped some valleys. Would have sort of bounced off the ridges. But at the same time, there's a lot of secondary damage that comes from a tornado too. Trees getting blown over, things getting sucked up and dropped. So I don't think it's a guarantee that hill country solves tornadoes. Clearly in this one, the fact that southern Illinois is so flat made it a real sitting duck for this tornado, and the damage was a lot worse because there were no obstacles all the way along. But I would probably keep that interior closet or interior bathroom in mind if things do get bad, because what could it harm you? Other comments or questions? Yes.
Tornado Alley shifting towards Arkansas?
Tornado Alley? Yeah, Tornado Alley is shifting farther and farther south, right? Or at least it has the last 10 years or so. What we used to think of Tornado Alley is, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. It keeps getting it started pushing farther and farther south. So now Mississippi and Alabama are getting hit with tons of really devastating tornadoes. It probably has something to do with where that temperature gradient hits. The storms the cold air from Canada is getting farther south than it used to before it starts to turn back up. You're right, yeah, Tornado Alley is on the move these days. Yes, sir.
Have you done any research on the one that hit Cape County in the 50s?
No, tell us about it.
I think killed
Hit, how many?
about 47.
47?
I stood on the front porch and watched it come.
I hope you were at a safe location when it came through. Good. 47 in Cape County.
To us, and then it turned and
I'll be darned. No, I'm not familiar with that one at all. And what was the year of that? What year?
I'd say the early 50s.
Early 50s. I remember there was a bad one that went through St. Louis in 57, and that caused a lot of property damage. I wonder if it might have been that same storm system. I don't know. I'll have to look that up. Thank you.
know when that tornado, the 25 tornado hit Wheeling, it split into two F5s. And the only school that it really got by without damage was the one in Wheeling, when we were both sides of that school.
Oh, okay. If everybody could hear the comment, when it hit Dealey, a lot, and I've read that too. A lot of people reported that it was a double funnel for a time, and that it sort of kind of semi-spared part of Dealey as a result. Yeah.
The two tornadoes that hit around Bob Lake and around Frederick.
Oh yeah, that was a bad one. No. What was the year on that? That's not been too long ago, 5-6 years ago. The Fredericktown, the Black River Electric Co-op building got wiped out, and a whole lot of.
Fossil Hollow was the second.
Okay, Knob Lick. Yeah. And you know, when you stop and start counting up, you realize killer tornadoes are not that uncommon. You know, it's like every year there's a pretty severe tornado will come through somewhere around here, and so we kind of owe it to ourselves to prepare a bit. Yes, sir.
So are tornadoes unique to North America or other continents?
The question was, are tornadoes unique to North America? Not quite. They get them in Australia, and they get them in Bangladesh and the coast, South Asian coast. In fact, I used to say that this was the deadliest tornado in history, till I thought, maybe I better double check that. And it turned out there was a tornado in Bangladesh that killed more people yet, than this one. So it's the second death. But they do get some tornadoes. But North America is where they happen. I mean, we're the natural home for killer tornadoes. The other places, it's really kind of a rare occurrence. Yes?
Fuji is still being outdated.
Well, it used to be what was called F5, F1 to F3 and 5. Now it's EF1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. It's the enhanced Fujita scale. But that's still the basic yardstick is the EF1 through 5 scale.
Yeah, but what if it's a tornado over a field and there's not very many buildings that you can really survey on? Wouldn't it be more based on the wind?
Yeah. Well, luckily nowadays we can go by what's on the radar, because we can get a really good accurate estimate on wind speed and strength like that just by looking at the radar records. So we don't have to work backward nearly as much as we do with like historic tornadoes. So usually like meteorologists, I'm not a meteorologist, but I admire the work they do. Usually they can give a pretty tentative label on a tornado while it's happening. It's like, yeah, but this looks to me like an F2 or 3 or that kind of thing, because there's just the measuring tools are so much better. Okay, I think that we should probably, you go ahead.
We met this couple that had been through the Joplin
Mm-hmm.
and the way they explained it to us, it seemed like it was a big surprise to them. That it wasn't a huge warning.
Yeah, the Joplin tornado, it did come on really fast, and they only had about a 15-minute warning for that tornado. And that was in May. The Joplin tornado was in May, and of course, folks in Joplin, in Southwest Missouri, they're kind of jaded about tornadoes because they get them a lot. And so I think one of the problems in Joplin was people said, that's another tornado warning. The sirens are going off. And, we hear that ourselves. Yeah, the sirens are going off, but it's nothing really, Don't pay any attention to it. And I think they had kind of developed a certain amount of complacency, I guess, regarding tornado warnings. That, they could have had more time warning, but it was just a super fast developing storm. You know, it looked like a big, ugly sail coming out of Kansas, but it just kind of suddenly materialized into a tornado right at the Kansas border. And so the folks in Joplin didn't get as much warning as they might have from more slowly. If it had been something they'd have been sort of kind of tracking and saying, yeah, this looks like a tornado, they could have probably had more warning, but it was a really quickly developing storm. There's some really good documentaries about the Joplin tornado if you're going to go on streaming services and look at them. And, you know, it is kind of sad because a lot of the people who were interviewed said, yeah, I got in my truck and I wanted to go out and look. And it's like, well, you dummy. No wonder you got to beat up like you did. Well, thank you all again so much. It's been wonderful to be here, and I'm available for continued conversation. I appreciate it a great deal. Thank you.
Just a couple of quick announcements. On each of your tables, we have this night out raffle. The night out raffle is a night out in St. Louis. It includes 2 tickets to the St. Louis Blues versus the Edmonton Oilers game, Section 118, and a night at a Drury Inn. That's March 13th. We also, in that same drawing, we're going to give away 3 packages. The second package is a night out in St. Genevieve, and includes a stay at the Audubon Hotel, $50 gift certificate. And then the last one is a night at the museum with your group of special behind-the-scenes friends, up to 5,000. Wait a minute, that might be a misprint. I don't know, maybe 20. We'd be lucky to find 20 friends. So, every one of you got these on your tables. Mindy is at the front door. She's welcomed you to take a chance on it. This is, again, one of the things that keeps our museum going. We would definitely not want to sign off here without saying thank you to Lakeman Insurance again for doing this, and for Dick for allowing us to be down here. Thank you, Dick. Steve, great presentation. Thank you very much. Be careful on the way home, folks. Oh, wait a minute, we got one here.
Bob, you might want to make sure that you mention, or I'll mention it for you, because Stephanie always does, that if you want your membership to the museum, they'll deduct the amount you paid to attend tonight's presentation.
Thank you, Michael.
From
So if you pay to get in and you're not a member, when you go out, you can deduct the cost of a membership. We'll take off this evening's price you paid to get in. Thank you, Mike, for bringing that up. Thank you, folks. Be careful on the way home.